Hi everybody, Kathy Brooks here from the Hydrant Club. Sorry for the changed time today. Sorry, I'm just closing a couple windows out here. Sorry for the adjusted time today. A little bit weird framing on the computer today. And I'm slouching. I'm a hot mess. I'm a hot mess this morning. No, I've been in a leadership training class all morning today, so I apologize that we had to pump this out another half hour, but thank you folks for tuning in to talk about today's topic for today's Canine Linguistics, how dogs play. So when I was a kid, back in the Stone Ages, when I was a child, when we had a dog when I was growing up, and if we weren't home during the day or we were out for the day, our dog stayed home. He had a big run outside where he could be outside, and if it was too hot or too cold, he was inside. If we went out of town, he maybe stayed in the house. So when I was little and they had somebody maybe babysitting me, he would stay in the house. Somebody would be there. And if nobody was going to be in the house, he went to the vet. And he usually boarded at the vet, or there was a boarding kennel to which he'd go. So this whole idea of doggy daycare, this idea of sending your dog to a place where a large number of dogs that are unrelated physically in almost all cases, some of them perhaps coming in pairs and triads from a single home, but dogs that don't know each other, they're of all different breeds, they're of all different ages, of all different behaviors, and throwing them in a room together is an awful idea. It's actually an awful idea. And the challenge with it is that it is counter to how dogs actually engage in play. Dog play isn't a group activity. While dogs live in groups and function in groups, also known as families, we don't use the P word. And for those of you who are new, I'll explain why in a minute. But dogs exist in groups, and they understand groups in hierarchy, but those groups don't all kind of mosh pit play at the same time. In fact, when you get a large number of dogs that all start running around together, you actually get the actual, I'll use the P word here because it's true, pack behavior, meaning they start behaving usually in a bad way, and they will drop to the lowest common denominator of primal behavior pretty much immediately. So why do they exist? They exist because some very smart dog care solution people, probably in the late 80s, early 90s, decided that they had a more functional way to care for dogs that was more efficient for them. So people have had dog walkers for centuries. There's old artwork and images from cities like New York where you'll see an individual out walking a number of dogs on lead at the same time. So this idea of dog walking services, somebody who will go to the home during the course of a long business day when there's nobody at home, and take the dog out, get them exercise, they can physically relieve themselves, all of that, that's not new. And you had some people in that industry who thought, well, if I have a place, a physical place to which the dogs can come or go, I can take care of more dogs and it's a little easier for me to do. It's a brilliant idea. And if those dogs are screened very, very thoroughly, if their behavior is filtered, because some dogs don't do well in a group anyway, but you filter the dogs really, really carefully, and then you have handlers in those spaces who are really finely tuned and very well trained on how to visually observe dog behavior, to be able to see warning signs, because the best way to break up a dog fight is to stop it from happening in the first place. So having people who understand the physicality of dog behavior, the vocalization of dog behavior, and then of course know the individual dogs, then you have people who are properly trained to manage the properly screened dogs, and then you have a scenario that's actually can be very healthy for dogs. And so I always I flinch a little bit when somebody says, oh, you run a doggy daycare. It's really an educational process for me, because the answer to that is no. I don't, not at the Hydrant Club. What we run is an educational facility. So our format, our structure, the content of what we do during the day is based on individualized curriculum for the dogs that is executed throughout the day in a very structured setting. Now, there are doggy daycares that aren't educational facilities that have structured enrichment play. Now, they're not led by trainers, they're led by handlers who have been given guidance, but the structure, well, there is a structure. You have other places where the extent of the structure is the number of dogs in playgroup at any given point in time. There's rather low level attention paid to the content of those groups, in terms of there's 12 to 15 dogs in a group, but it doesn't really matter what 10 to 15 dogs, so they kind of rotate dogs through. Some places like that require that you pay for the day care, but if you want them, and that will come with X amount of times in group, if you want them to have more group time, you pay for additional times. So those dogs are rotated in and out of either kennels or crates or cages or suites or whatever, some sort of containment unit. They're rotated in and out, and then they're in the group for a period of time. And that group time is really elimination in terms of waste, so peeing and pooping, as well as a certain amount of playtime, and then it's back in the crate, cage, or kennel. And so a lot of those facilities, especially high volume, are really more focused on the movement of the dogs in and out and all of that. Oh goodness. Hi, I have someone here from the UK. Hi, yes, I remember when you came. How amazing. Thank you so much for the kind words. When travel and things are allowed again, I hope you will come back and visit us. And I'm going to want to leave the country as soon as I'm allowed to and visit somewhere else. That'll be very exciting. So dog play. So let's talk about, 2029. I was wondering about that. I didn't think you were from the future, but that's very exciting. It would be great if you're actually calling in from 2029. Can you please tell me how this year's election in the United States goes? Because that would be amazing. And I'd also like the lottery numbers from next week, if you don't mind. So back to the point of dog play. So how do dogs engage in play, and what is it that we're looking for? So when we're looking at dog behavior and a dog, do we allow a dog to engage with another dog, and how do we allow those dogs, or do we allow those dogs to engage with each other in some sort of play environment? So the first thing to look at is a dog's body language. Now, a dog's body language is going to be based partially on breed. Some breeds are just built a certain way. If you have a bulldog, you're very aware of this. If you have any sort of bully breed dog, you're aware of this. They're very chest forward, very square forward, very muscular build dogs. Their relaxed state still looks very energy forward. You have other very broad-chested Mastiff breeds. You have some dogs where the ears, kind of as a breed standard, have been docked, and so the dogs are kind of forced by man's machinations into a posture that is an assertive posture. So it's important to know your own dog's breed or breeds, and to be familiar with what is neutral, what is the neutral or natural relaxed state for your dog. And if you've just gotten your dog and your dog's been in a shelter, the likelihood that you have that information on, say, anywhere between day 1 and day 7 is probably pretty slim. And that time period could be a little longer. I've seen cases with some dogs that come out of rescues or shelters where it can take them 4 to 6 weeks to really relax into who they actually are. It depends so much on the environment that they were in, any trauma they may have been through, any breeding issues that you may never know about if you got your dog from a rescue or from a shelter, or if you found it on the street. So there's a lot of time you need to take getting your dog together, getting to know your dog, and getting to know your dog's natural state. So this is a reason why when you get a dog, especially if we're talking an older dog, we're talking a dog that you get out of a rescue or a shelter, The first thing you shouldn't do is take it to a dog park. You know, you shouldn't just throw it in with another group of dogs until you're very familiar with your dog. So I'm getting a question about pugs. Pugs are another dog that have kind of that very kind of energy forward. I kind of think they always kind of sound like this if they were to talk. You know, they all look a little like Ernest Borgnine, the actor from McHale's Navy, which is kind of, I think, unfortunate for the pug, but they're adorable. They such expressive eyes, but that brachycephalic that crushed muzzle does mean that those breed dogs tend to enter a group kind of leaning into it because they're trying to get a little more information. They're hindered with that restricted muzzle. And so again, if you are you've just gotten a new dog, you've just gotten it out of a shelter, you want to take some time to really get to know your dog and let your dog relax so that you can be a good steward of that dog's behavior. Meaning you can get to know when the dog is anxious, when the dog is relaxed, when the dog is feeling a little energy forward. So that would be tip 1. And then once you have an idea of what your dog's natural body posture is, in terms of where its ears, its tail, its shoulders, its general body position are when they're relaxed, then that gives you the baseline to understand when your dog is anything other than that balance. So what are the things that we want to look for and be careful of? One of the things that people misinterpret all the time is a dog's tail. People say that a wagging tail is a happy dog. And that is not necessarily always the case. The position of the tail, the pattern of the wag, the speed that the tail is moving, all of these things are factors in whether the dog is happy or sad or anxious or warning you or any of those things. So thinking about the position, and again, keep in mind this is a very broad brush that I'm about to paint with because you have breed specificity with some dogs and you also have individual dogs. I have seen some dogs where I've seen some huskies, for example, their natural tail carriage tends to be kind of up and over their back in a curve, but there is a difference between up in a stiff curve, or relaxed. I have seen some huskies who actually relax their tail, and so their tail almost slopes down, almost like a retriever tail, and that was relaxed for the dog. Typically, a dog's tail that is down, and I don't mean just down and relaxed, I mean like down and tucked. Typically, a tail that is down or tucked means the dog is uncomfortable. It could mean the dog is fearful. If you couple that position with wagging, that's not a happy dog. That's a dog that's actually signaling to you that they are uncomfortable and to please leave me alone. It's usually going to be coupled with ears that are maybe pulled or tucked back against its head. The dog may be anxiety panting. They may have actually pulled their lips back. I saw a picture one day of a dog and people say, oh, look, this dog is so happy. And the dog, literally, its lips were pulled all the way back with just a curve on the end. To a human interpretation, it may look like the dog was smiling. That kind of grimace is actually a sign of deep anxiety in a dog. That's a dog that may actually bite. So it's really important to be aware of the dog's facial expression as well as its ear position. So let's get back to the tail. A tail that is up and positioned stiffly is usually, think of it like a gently waving yellow caution flag. That is a dog that is coming into the space very, very stiffly, kind of making itself a little bit bigger, signaling to another dog, I might be the bigger dog here, so I'm not entirely sure what you think is happening. You see this a lot where two dogs come up to each other and one dog's tail will go up really stiff and the other dog's tail, which may be relaxed, may actually get stiff in response to it. So a lot of times I'll see a dog come up and have head forward, neck up, shoulders up, ears forward, tail very up and stiff. And it approaches another dog, they sniff each other, and then slowly that dog that has that head up slowly starts to put its head over the neck or the back of the other dog. That is a posture of dominance, my friends, and it could be received poorly. Sometimes, if the dogs meeting each other are both very well balanced, they will have an engagement where they find their balance between each other. But what we want to be very careful of as humans is that we're not just letting the dogs figure it out. Just letting the dogs figure it out could result in the kind of skirmish that no human wants to see. Equally as important, our intervening incorrectly could also catalyze the very thing that we're trying to avoid. I've seen more dog park dog fights started by humans who thought they were doing the right thing, but they intervened with such aggressive tone or such panicked tone that they ended up fueling the behavior that they were actually trying to avoid in the first place. So paying attention to a dog's tail is important. Now you might say to me, but Kathy, what do we do if the dog's tail is docked? If you've got a Doberman, a Rottweiler, an Australian Shepherd, a Boxer, a Schnauzer, a Black Russian Terrier, any of these breeds, even, the Weimaraner or the Vizsla, these dogs where the tails are kind of cut to a portion of their natural length. Some tail dockings are done very poorly. They're done at such a base joint of the dog's kind of extension of its spine that there's really no tail left whatsoever. So you have a situation where you can't, unless you're right next to the dog and can actually see the dog's full posterior and can see like whether it's tucked under or not, you are hampered as a human. Guess who else is hampered in that situation? Other dogs. So that tail position for the dog isn't just for our interpretation, it's how dogs communicate with each other. I had a scenario a couple of years ago with a young Cane Corso who had actually been abused at another dog facility. The owners found out, got them out of the facility, got the dog out and asked if we could do some rehabilitation work with the dog. Now, with disclosure, in my own personal experience, the Cane Corso typically isn't a great group play dog. That doesn't mean that there aren't Cane Corsos that do very well in group play, but typically the breed is made and designed as organizer is the best good way to describe it. So these are dogs that are designed to implement order, whether that be in herding small livestock, whether that be used in police or protection or military work, big boned, big breed, large mastiff that, has got it going on, really big dog. And typically these dogs, if they see something in a group play environment that they perceive as being out of order, their natural instinct is to try to instill order. And so sometimes that doesn't go so well in a group dog play environment. I have seen some Canes and some Presa Canarios that have done incredibly well in group play environment. It's really an individualized thing. But just as a point, we knew that this dog probably wasn't a long-term member of our club, but our goal was really to try to help this dog rehabilitate and to kind of take off some of the edges of behavior that had arisen. So dog comes in, dog is standing next to me. He's got his ears cropped, so his ears are in what appeared to be a very sharply forward assertive position. Tail is docked. There was about a half-inch nub of his tail, if even, that was left. And the dog is standing immediately next to me. And we had put him through some cognitive testing, and now it was time to do his first social interaction. So I've got him standing next to me. His body language is completely relaxed. His shoulders aren't tense. His whole body is relaxed. His tail is in a relaxed and neutral position, at least the stub of it that was still there. And his ears, what we could see of them, again, ear posture, very, very relaxed. So we bring in the first testing dog, who was my Bridger at the time, and Bridger enters the room, and Bridger loves meeting other dogs, and so he sees another dog and he gets so excited. His tail goes up and starts wagging, his whole body starts wagging, and literally in a split second after laying his eyes on this dog, his entire body shifted. He went from, hey, new dog, I'm super excited, I can't wait to meet you, to who the hell are you? What the hell are you doing here? And get away from my mother. Very, very stiff body language. Now, what I could see, because this dog was right next to me, was that the dog's tail had started to wag. A very relaxed kind of mid-posture wag. The dog's whole body was wagging. His ears were very relaxed. He was alert, but in a really relaxed and appropriate way. What this dog then did is what broke the ice. He went into a play bow. Now, There's a difference between a crouch of a dog that is about to spring in an attack mode and a full lowering of the body, full front part of his legs from toe tip to elbow on the ground with his head slightly lowered and almost a mischievous look, kind of sideways look with a tiny little woof and a very, relaxed body posture. Everything about him was relaxed. When Bridger saw that, he relaxed again. Now, imagine this in a scenario where you're in a public dog park and you walk in and your dog's now 20 feet away from you and the other dog is in front of your dog and you can't see its tail and you can't see its body language. You get a scenario where you may or may not have a dangerous situation for your dog. And I'm getting a question about a cockapoo who has become slightly aggressive towards around in the home, specifically around visitors in the home. Interesting. So the questions that I would ask, cockapoo, not typically a dog that you hear about with, aggression issues, sometimes territorial issues, sometimes fear-based discomfort. So the questions that I would ask is, first, always when a dog's behavior changes out of the blue, completely, atypical of a dog, have you had any sort of physical examination done of the dog? Is there any sort of dental issue, for example? I have a dog who I just recently had to have a couple of teeth extracted. She had been acting out a little bit. She was in discomfort. So when we discovered the source of the discomfort and we got the issue resolved, then that issue went away. So a full physical exam to make sure there's no urinary tract infection, there's no ear infection or yeast situation happening, there's no dental issue, there's no organ issue, full blood workup, stools are fine, no vomiting, no coughing, no sneezing, no lethargy, healthy dog. Then you need to start looking at the environment. Has anything changed there? Are there new people in the home? Or, in today's day and age, in a time where dogs that have been social have now been isolated for really long periods of time, teaching them to be social again does take a little doing. So if you've had a situation where your house usually has visitors and when the dog was young, was having some social time, and then all of a sudden for months there was nothing, you want to think about reintroducing your dog slowly, maybe meeting people outside, maybe having people come in the home and get comfortable first, bringing the dog into the room on leash, walking the dog around the room, so that as the dog gets walked around the room on leash and kind of properly introduced to people. Slow introduction is sometimes a good solution. Dogs that have developed some sort of territorial issue, it's usually that there has been a change in the environment or among the humans that are in the environment. Have there been new people added or subtracted from the equation? What's the interaction or engagement or energy, if you will, between the people in the space? Have the people in the space changed the nature of the relationship? Is there friction of some sort? Has someone lost a job? Has someone taken ill? Has a family member died? Are there any sort of things that the humans are going through that might on some level color the interaction between the humans as well as the interaction with the dog? All of these things can absolutely be factors. But going to a vet and getting a good physical, ruling out anything physical first, is always a recommendation that I make when a behavior has changed immediately. So getting back to kind of physicality of the dog. So you've got relaxed body posture. So what if a dog's body posture isn't relaxed at all? You see this a lot if you're out walking your dog, and people see this all the time. You're walking down the street, you see another dog, and I hear a lot about leash reactivity. So dog is on a leash, sees another dog or a person or a skateboard or whatever it is, and they get completely and physically tied up and bunched up, and they react to it. And this is a good dog that's never hurt anybody, that's got no aggression issues, and yet it turns into Cujo, the minute it sees another dog on a leash. So the solution isn't just to walk up to another dog and let them say hello. It's never a good idea. Typically, when I'm out in public with my dogs, the number of times I allow my dogs to say hello to another dog just on the sidewalk is pretty much never. And it's not that I don't want my dogs to meet other dogs. It's not that I don't want my dogs to be social. But if I'm watching this other person and I see that there's a kind of very tightly choked up leash, the dog is straining out at the end, the owner and the dog clearly don't have an understanding of who's actually in charge in that moment, the last thing I want to do is add a catalyzing element, AKA the excitement of meeting another dog, to the equation. Because if that dog reacts negatively, my dogs may react in kind because they're dogs. Now, do I have a fairly good confidence that my dogs, if barked at in a nasty way, won't react? With 2 out of 3, yes. With one of them, she's a work in progress. So it's important to think about, when you're looking to let the dogs engage, it's not just about whether your dog is okay, or if the other person says my dog is okay. Both of your dogs may very well actually be okay, but that doesn't mean that your dogs together would be okay. Especially leash engagements can be particularly troubling if you don't have 2 people on either ends of the leads who are very, very comfortable in the proper handling of their dogs. A tight, choked up leash is a sure sign that that's not a dog that I'm going to let my dog say hello to, at least not in that scenario. One of the things that happens when you choke up on a leash is you get a dog that kind of strains against it. I was talking with a friend of mine about this the other day. If I'm walking along with you and I yank your arm and try to pull you in a direction, what are you going to do? Probably going to pull counter to that movement. So you need to get your dog to a point where you're able to have a loose enough lead with the dog that the dog has some comfort. And I'll talk about loose leash techniques and walking your dog in another episode of Canine Linguistics. So for today, when we kind of recap on body language and how dogs play, dog play, not a group activity, despite the fact that many people have their dogs in group spaces. So you want to make sure that that environment is structured, that dogs have a lot of one-on-one play time or just 2 or 3 dogs playing at a time. Groups of dogs playing, I've talked about how the P word, pack, is an entirely inaccurate word to use to describe a group of dogs, even a group of dogs that is all genetically connected to each other. And I'll define it for those of you who may have missed me explaining it on an earlier episode. The definition of the word pack, if you look it up in a dictionary, which I recommend that you do, it means a collection of things that are precisely the same. A pack of gum, a pack of cigarettes, which you shouldn't smoke, pack of cigarettes, pack of matches. Open up any one of those 3 elements and look at the things inside, and you will see completely uniform, identical things. Now let's look at a wolf family as the core inception, right? You have the alpha male and female, and you have all of the relatives underneath that. They're all genetically linked. But are they all identical? No. They will resemble each other. Their coat colors will be different. Their eye colors may be different. Their tails may stand in a different way. Their ears may look different. They'll be of different sizes and shapes. So although they are genetically linked, they are not identical. Think of your own nuclear pack, right? So you have your mother and father, you have the children, all different. All different. So even in my family, we look alike, we sound alike, we are all very much very different people. And so when we think about a group of dogs, now let's look at that in a day school or a doggy daycare environment. They are absolutely not a pack because they're not from the same family. And even if they are, the likelihood that they're from the same genetic family is actually very, very slim. You do not see a lot of instances of people getting dogs from the same litter. Now, they might get from the same mom and dad from multiple generations down, which would be related, but those are pretty anomalous as the true cases go. So it isn't a pack. It's a group. It's a family. And if you think about the socialized meaning of the word pack, it's not a positive one. When we talk about a wolf pack of men, we're not talking about a group of men who are out doing philanthropic work. It's a very pejorative statement to describe that group. It means unruly, sinister, a mob. None of those things are good. And so to describe a group of dogs as a pack is etymologically and sociologically wrong. So we don't want pack behavior because, as I mentioned before, if you get a bunch of dogs that start whipping around in a big group, what happens? Somebody's going to whip around and nip at somebody. Or someone's going to nip at someone in jest and someone's going to get ticked off. And that's when true pack in the negative sense, they pack up and it can become a scrum pretty quickly. So with that, I'm going to sign off for today's episode of Canine Linguistics, mostly because my AC just clicked off in here. I had my hoodie on because it was chilly, and now it's not chilly. So I'm going to sign off. Thanks so much for tuning in for today's episode of Canine Linguistics. Tune in next week.